Hello and welcome to the very first NVR Association podcast. The community podcast is just being launched. My name is Rachael Aylmer and I'm a director for PartnershipProjects and have been a NVR practitioner for several years, an accredited NVR practitioner, working with clients and delivering training and supervising colleagues up and down the country. And I'm here today with...
Hi, morning, Rachael. My name is Warren Matofsky. I'm a clinical and community psychologist. I work for NHS CAMHS, that's Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, across Sussex.
Warm welcome. So, Warren, you are our very first podcast host, our first guest into the first podcast. So what brings you here today? I know you're a man of many stories, so I'm really interested what you're going to be talking about.
Well, I've come here to talk about how, over the last 6 years, we've developed a programme in Sussex CAMHS to support parents, carers and families around severe anxiety problems in children, and how we've taken the new Authority Model and how it's been a real resource in working with families and working with wider professional networks. It's been an exciting project. We've had some really positive feedback from families, from people working in schools, and I'm really keen to share what we've learnt and hopefully support others to take up this approach. We work in a time where there's real kind of resource challenges. The evidence base around working with quite severe anxiety problems is limited. And here we have a modality that I think has kind of real teeth and creates real opportunities for practitioners.
So the model that you're describing then is focusing solely on young people that are faced with anxiety challenges. Is that right?
Indeed. And, I work in the specialist CAMHS services, which means we deal with young people where the problems are quite complicated, kind of been around for quite a long time. And it's in terms of supporting and responding to their needs that we've, turned to the new Authority Model NVR as a resource.
So how did all this come about then, Warren? What was your vision how did it start?
So there's a long and a longer story. I'll try and, I know we've only got 20 minutes. Back in 2013, 2014, I was working across a large rural area. And in rural areas, you tend to see higher levels of school avoidance, kind of school refusal, in the context of often families that are multiply challenged and young people with quite severe anxiety problems. And I saw that group of young people would often have offered a range of therapies, whether it's family therapy, maybe child-focused CBT, maybe involvement with psychiatry and medication, maybe some brief consultation to school. But nothing seemed to really have significant impact, and there was something kind of missing. And it was at that point that Rachael Aylmer and Ellie Leibovit's book came out, taking the principles of NVR, which I'd had some training in and I worked alongside Peter Jakob, but applying it in the context of real challenges around anxiety. And so that's when I started to think about, actually, is this something that could really help that particular kind of population? So that was kind of one of my drivers, an interest in that school refusal population. At the same time, we're kind of 3-4 years into austerity. I was seeing real increases in wait times in CAMHS, and I was keen to develop an intervention that was kind of scalable, that could offer something that had impact to kind of significant numbers and increasing numbers of families coming into CAMHS where the child was struggling with anxiety. And that's where I came across the S.P.A.C.E programme. I got in touch with Ellie Leibovitz at Yale, and he was really supportive of us in terms of kind of developing the programme that we started to develop across our CAMHS clinics.
And so how many people in your team and what type of, how does this work? I've got lots of questions, I guess. Let's just start from the beginning.
Well,
how does
So it's
work across your staff?
Yeah, so it started off with me and a helpful family therapy colleague that developed a structure. We were running it live in the room for the first kind of 4 years. It would work over about 4 months with 3 group meetings and then an individual debrief with the family, working through the key aspects of the new authority model: supportive presence, self-control, structure, and social support. And what I found was that, first of all, parents of kids with severe anxiety problems are massively isolated. And it was just such a resource for them to be around others that kind of understood, and in that context could really start to work through some of the barriers that were getting in the way of them kind of making changes. So you're asking about who's involved. So over those first 3 to 4 years, we ran the program 4 times a year. And we got really positive feedback. The outcomes data we collected, which is really useful in terms of selling it to service managers, commissioners, and getting buy-in. We got positive feedback from that, and then from that started to train a number of clinicians across the service to deliver groups as well. And what we found was that those that we started to train up delivering groups were getting similar levels of outcomes from the group, and it's kind of grown from there.
So groups. So another question: groups. How long? How many people? How many parents, families were involved? How many weeks?
Yeah.
And then also, how do you measure the whole of that journey with families?
Yeah. So there was 2 elements to this. One was a clinical intervention run in CAMHS. It was a group that met monthly. When it was in the room for 2 hours, there would be 3 sessions, and then a non-group debrief for the particular family. And and in terms of numbers in the group, it was kind of guided by the size of the room that I had. So the room fitted about 16 people really well. And it would just allow the structuring of the group to work well and to have that sort of number. So there were 16 slots in it. If there was a co-parenting situation, then maybe the co-parents would come. We often had carers, whether that was aunties, grandmas, older siblings might join a parent or carer, and we would work through that. Alongside that, because the S.P.A.C.E. model really focuses on reducing kind of family accommodation, there was a community psychology arm to this. So we will be delivering training for teachers and support staff in schools about reducing accommodation in school. That would be a half-day training followed up by some kind of consultation, so that there was work going on with the families to guide change at home, but also within the educational setting as well. And you asked about kind of the outcomes and how we were tracking that. Well, one was kind of, parent feedback, how they were kind of finding it, what they were saying after the program. And nearly everybody was saying that the house was kind of a lot calmer. That was a really significant thing for us. Yes, we used some psychometric tools as well. So we were tracking child's functioning using a parent-completed child outcome rating scale, and about 3/4 were showing improved functioning. And as well, Ellie Leibovitz and the team at Yale had produced a family accommodation scale. So we were tracking reductions in accommodation. One slight limitation with tracking accommodation is that often a lot of accommodation happens out of awareness. So in every single group, there was always a number of parents that partway through the program kind of had this aha moment where they started to notice all this accommodation that they were doing. And so while the scale might not show big drops over the course of the group, it will be in the middle of the group that parents realize how much was going on and then start to reduce from that level. And I think, there were some challenging questions about accommodation, because the idea of accommodation kind of has some edges to it, because parents can feel blamed.
Say more about
because around accommodation, parents can feel kind of blamed or finger wagging. Oh, you're doing accommodation, you're causing the child's problems. Somehow it's your failure as a parent that you're accommodating. And that was not where we were coming from at all, because we know that accommodation is a product of love, or as professionals talk about it, attachment. Our biological systems, parents are driven to respond to the child's fear cues, and also children are predisposed to seek support from their children when they're distressed. And so that was one of the key themes that we kind of had to work through in our programme, the emotional context in which accommodation happens, in which it's recognised, and how parents and carers and staff in schools can start to step back from those accommodating behaviours.
I wonder as well, when you were saying that you were witnessing as the parents progressed in their journey in the sessions, those real aha moments when parents are beginning to formulate a better understanding in ways in which I wonder what other barriers, Warren, you were experiencing, parents, around their resistance to stop accommodating, or that desire for a parent to continue to meet their child's needs in those ways.
Yeah, it's a tricky word, that resistance. A mate of mine calls it the R word, because in some ways it sounds like it's a conscious thing, but I think it can often work at other levels. I mean, it was interesting because in the group, we had all these tools from S.P.A.C.E. and all the publications that Chaim and Ellie had kind of put together, which included the what, but not necessarily the how. And the how was the most challenging bit, because we found in the group there was a lot of frustration, hopelessness, a lot of shame that might get communicated as withdrawal, or at times kind of anger or kind of dysregulation. And really what we were trying to develop a group process that would allow us to work with that, to allow self-blame to be acknowledged, named, challenged, and kind of worked through. And part of that was about normalizing the notion of accommodation, really challenging the, naming parent blaming, which is pervasive in our society and gets into the group, gets into parents' minds, and often gets into therapists' minds as well. So holding that up to be acknowledged and challenged. And one of the things that I would often hear in these groups is parents challenging other parents and carers, self kind of blame and putting themselves down. And as therapists, one of the ways we sought to attend to that was by embodying the model. At the heart of some of the coaching aspects of S.P.A.C.E. is this idea about supportive presence, that supportive presence involves communicating to the child, I understand that it's really difficult, that you're distressed and that you're in fear, but also I have confidence in your ability to cope. I'm not going to take away the anxiety, but I'm going to stand with you while you kind of work through it. And for us as therapists, we would try to embody that in terms of how we responded to the challenges that parents brought in the group. And that notion, I think, was really helpful for us in terms of developing ideas about the culture of this group, how we kind of respond to the difficulties that come up. Because, it's not just instructional. If there was a set of instructions that parents could simply follow and sort out these difficulties, then it wouldn't need us. We'd all be sat on the beach living off the royalties of our books. But as we know, change is hard. Change is a kind of hard one, not least when parents have been working with these challenges for years.
And the emotional attachment, parents are so emotionally connected to their children. And that is the drive, isn't it? That's one of the driving factors, that parents witnessing the distress of their child is painful. And parents can have a different range of emotions that is attached to that.
And that was one of the... Sorry, Rachel.
No, go on. Sorry, I was just rambling. Carry on.
No, that's really helpful because that's one of the ways we began to attend to this in terms of how we formulated how we can develop the culture of a group was beginning to really focus on what some of those emotions are. So, for example, one of the things we're really listening carefully for is any initiatives that parents take, any steps, however minute and small, that kind of come up in the group, because our assumption is that has required getting over barriers and hurdles, and often they're emotional ones, and beginning to pick out and name what those emotions were. Because in somehow standing back from accommodation is deeply counterintuitive. Every cell in a parent's body wants to take away their child's distress. It is horrible. It is aversive. And how they begin to cope and tolerate that and explore what they have done in order to do that. So one of the, I'll share one of the things from our staff training. One of the things I often hear in the group when parents are about to share something that they've done is they just say, there's this kind of real minimizing of what they've done. But that's not what I've learned from. What I've learned from this group is that is really hard won, and trying to unpick how they were able to do that can help parents develop their own kind of resources for weathering the anxiety storm and staying with their, commitment to develop a way of responding rather than reacting to the child's distress.
We all assume that although the journey is a tough one for parents and caregivers, that when change comes about, that it's something to be really celebrated. And there's a sense of that achievement when the parent can resist accommodating that young person. And then through that resistance, the young person has that ability to regulate that space for them to be able to create their own, reduce their own distress levels. But do you experience occasions when parents have that dependency, that they feel a sense of sadness, that they're no longer needed in their child's world in that capacity? Does that make sense? I don't know if that's a question that I formulated it very well, but
I hear that. I suppose that the starting point, because we're working in community CAMHS and we're really working at the severe end of difficulties where there's very high levels of functional impairment across home, kind of school and community. And we're offering kind of quite a brief intervention. We're often at the point of getting parents started on this journey. And often that in itself is really tough because, I think as Bion said, the first stage of learning is hatred. You have to really kind of let go of something. And often parents might come with this belief that my child has to obey, or that if I change now, it means that I failed to change before, or that things are bad, but change could be worse. So in some ways, that's the kind of challenge. And as well, I think where it does come up, the point you make is that as children move to the next developmental stage, parents kind of have to catch up, that there's less presence and control as somebody moves into adolescence. And I need to add that our group is largely focused on that secondary age school group that we often kind of see in CAMHS. So as you say, there is a loss for a parent in terms of that kind of stepping back, not least when your child is perceived as kind of seriously ill, in distress, that needs more attention, how you kind of learn to step back from that and the losses that might incur. So I can certainly, kind of connect with what you say. In some ways, the support of the group and other parents can be really important to that. So that's at one level. At the other level, often parents need support after the group, and we might do more focus work with an individual family, picking up on some of the things that they've learned in the group and how to take that forward as well.
In terms of, I've developed many NVR groups with parents in my time, and one of the key things that used to strike me, Warren, was after parents had developed some of this new authority, this new way of parenting for them, was the maintenance and how they were to continue to be able to keep these mantras, to keep these principles alive, and to continue to practice. What do you support parents with in that? How do they keep their skills alive, so to speak?
Well, what's helped us with that is as we've moved to digitise our programme. So I'm going to just speak a bit about that, and then I'll come back to kind of what you've said. Because in some ways, while the massive losses at multiple levels over COVID, it was a real drive for us to kind of digitise our programme. So what we have done now is moving from a group that met in the room and there was worksheets and handouts. We have built an app using a platform called Mind District that holds all our psychoeducational videos, all the tracking tools and kind of reflective diaries and goals and all the outcome measures. And so parents work through that alongside attending digital sessions on Zoom. We have 5 Zoom sessions now. And so that means that in the group, we're really focused on, rather than the kind of coaching and sort of teaching bits, really working with the process of applying what they've learned through using the app. Now, parents that come into our program keep the license for the app forever. So even after they've been through the program, if they're not having any follow-up support directly around the new authority model, they can go back to the app, they can go through the videos, they can look at their kind of monitoring sheets, and that can help them kind of keep some of the ideas alive. Interestingly, a number of parents have said to us, can't we continue to kind of meet up and kind of stay linked? And, that's quite complicated for us as a service in terms of resources to facilitate that, and also, linking up parents in a non-facilitated way, how that could be done safely. And that's certainly something that we are looking at, and I'm interested in sort of developing, because I think you're right. I think sustaining the kind of change is a tough one, because change is kind of slow and there are barriers in terms of service resources and how long we're able to continue offering direct support. But we hope having the tools continually available is kind of one way of addressing that.
No, that sounds amazing. I mean, an ongoing app that is yours for the rest of your life, that you touch base with, that you recap, that you revisit, that you reconnect, that just supports all of your learning and understanding. That's amazing. I'd like to see that app. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we were determined to co-develop this app, and that process in itself has fed back into the whole program. So we recruited together a lived experience advisory panel. So that's parents of young people that had been through CAMHS in a group, and they were able to review all those materials. So what that gave us, while every time we've run the program, it's fundamentally about working in partnership, about getting feedback and learning from everyone that's been through it. Here was a group that were in some ways removed, looking at everything we've done and talking through how we could make it really fit with parents and carers' preferences and needs. And like one of the big themes in that group was similar theme in our group, is how you can address this sense of parent blame, and how you can work through the kind of shame that comes from having a child, often happens with a child with having difficulties. And that group had loads of really rich ideas about how we could address that, but they agreed that that was fundamental to their engagement. So that process of co-developing the app has fed through to the whole program. I mean, just at one level, we used to call it a workshop because we were just a bit concerned that calling it a group or a therapy group could be off-putting to certain parents. And this group said, why are you calling it a workshop? A workshop is something you go on to help with your gardening techniques. This is a program, but parents want to have this sense that it's something that's really kind of kosher and kind of well formulated. And lots of suggestions like that really helped us take our program to the next stage, really.
A program, yeah. It feels very permanent. It feels quite concrete, a program. When we think about programs that other service users might access, in terms of when I was developing some NVR groups, I had a friend who was in recovery, and I went with that friend to a recovery meeting, and sat right at the outskirts of the circle, but just witnessed the structure of the group with permission. I got permission to sit and make notes, and how that group was formulated and that sense of belonging. But it was very much a program with themes that run through each session. And the strength, what the addicts were coming with their own sense of safety and strengths. The group work, sorry, I just dropped my pen. The group work, I think, is amazing, but the program itself and how that operates within that session time and the commitment that I think people come with when it's structured in a way, I think that's really strong, feels really containing.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's really important that we really attend to process. What's been quite liberating for me is having this app means that I'm not teacher. Because before, when we're running the sessions, moving from kind of teacher mode to facilitator to explorer mode was quite complicated. And actually what surprised me was, even though it had an evening class kind of culture, people would make major disclosures in this group. You know, people would talk about their own experiences of parenting, which I think is fundamental to working through some of those barriers we mentioned earlier. Now everything's in the app. The whole of the session is a facilitated conversation. So it feels like us as facilitators are staying in one mode of orientation around exploring the impact of the materials, helping people kind of feel safe enough to explore what might get in the way of applying them and supporting them with their commitment to change. So that's one thing I've really valued. While it was a lot of work, it took, 18 months of the first 18 months of COVID to really build it. Now in the group, I feel a bit more liberated to focus on how we can use the sessions, really productively to support families working out how they can apply these ideas in their own lives and in their own households and communities.
So, but not having the face-to-face sessions, as you described, where there is the likelihood of parents disclosing more about themselves and their own parentage, and the app. Do you feel the app takes that away? Does it offer less opportunities for parents to explore that, or is it explored in a different way?
Oh, sorry, I haven't been clear. So parents have the app, but then we have 5 online sessions. So as opposed to meeting in the room, we're meeting on Zoom.
Yes.
And it's in those sessions where the work kind of really, the work is the parents' efforts in the real world, but that's how they get their support and work through how they can kind of apply it. I mean, there are differences to being on Zoom to being in the room. These are well kind of acknowledged. It's a different kind of group, but again, that doesn't mean that we can't, that there aren't significant disclosures, that we're not working at quite deep levels kind of within the group. I'm interested as we go forward and we're more able to run groups in the room, running both with people using the app and seeing how the process is different, room and Zoom. One of the challenges, we work across kind of large rural areas, large geographical areas, and it can be quite a challenge for parents to get to one central location. I mean, when we ran them, people would travel, 90 minutes each way to kind of get there. So there is that practical issue. At the same time, when parents are joining a group on Zoom from home, there's real issues with presence when, the kids might be somewhere else or they might be trying to come in, and reflecting on what's happening when you're still in the place can be challenging. So we're still weighing up the pros and cons around
And long may this continue. I'm just thinking about the families that you've worked with and how this model has improved relationships between parents and young people, relationships with children, being able to access their education in ways that's helpful. Helping parents overcome some of the barriers in supporting their children. Just feels so positive. We need to have more of these, Warren. So why does not every CAMHS service have this?
Well, I'm really keen that services think about and use this model. I mean, it was interesting when I first started in CAMHS, and that was kind of the late 90s, early noughties. It felt like there was a real gap, that there was kind of child-focused therapies that parents might support as reinforcing or co-therapists, and then there was family therapy. But kind of parent work wasn't seen as something that CAMHS did. Somehow that's what the kind of local authorities did. And this struck me as a kind of massive gap. And actually, when they've done some research on this, they find that mental health workers' confidence in working with parents is highly variable. And I think this is such a lost opportunity. And, what our data shows is that you can generate real improvements in child functioning without actually seeing the child. To me, that's kind of common sense, but sometimes you need a bit of science to prove common sense, so it kind of has traction. But I think there has to, generating that interest in supporting staff, giving them confidence in working with parents, but also giving them some models that help kind of guide them through when you get stuck. And that's the kind of reality. What I often say in supervision when I hear, this is not working, the parent kind of can't apply this. That's not a case of the model not working. That's how it works, that we have to get stuck and we have to find ways through that we have a containing role, that there's a supportive role of the group. And then there's the resources of the modality that parents can really lean into and think through, and that we should expect that. I think it was Chaim Aylmer that talked about the fact that engaging with ideas of new authority are disappointing but liberating. It's inevitably disappointing that I can't control my child. I can only kind of control myself. But really engaging with that, not just at an intellectual level, yes, you can read it on the app, but kind of at an emotional level, is such an important thing, that my authority doesn't come from the child's compliance, but comes from my commitment to persist and manage myself in a way that I continue to act in a particular way. And that's what can drive the change. And that inevitably kind of takes time and support.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I'm just thinking about the language you're using, about persist and, that continued message and effort. Many parents have fed back to me, that NVR is really, really simple, but it's so hard. And so I think the challenges and the barriers that we face, the stuckness as practitioners working with families through this journey, as you said, it's all part of the journey. Yeah. Such an interesting model, and wishing it was more widely accessible throughout the whole country for families, because there are hundreds of families that are struggling to be able to support their children when their children present with anxieties and difficulties. In summary, do you have any lasting words, Warren?
I think in summary, focused work with kind of parents and carers and the wider community. I haven't talked so much about the community arm of this. I think is just really important, particularly as we've seen over the last 18 months, significant increases in demand for kind of child mental health services, and also a need for us to develop new kind of models of intervention. And I think not only we need to support parents linking in with the community, we also need to support workers linking in with others in professional groups like the NVRA and learning about different and new practices to really energize and nurture, our commitments and kind of professional interests.
Yeah. And this is an organisation in NVRA in its infancy. We're hoping that it will grow and we'll have more professional members that are wanting to really expand their NVR knowledge and understanding and work collaboratively with colleagues up and down the country. Thanks, Warren. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure there's loads more that you probably could have added and was sort of pushed for time. So perhaps another visit later in the year, we could revisit this again.
Oh, that'd be great. You know, the refreshments have been great, Rachel. I've really enjoyed joining you for the podcast.
Thank you. Okay. Well, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from you.
Grand. Yeah, no, I just, you know, so I want to talk about what I'm talking about, but at the same time, I want to give you what you kind of wanted. I didn't manage to shoehorn in any of my jokes. Sorry if it was a bit serious, but yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it felt. So it just felt a bit kind of professionalese. I don't know if I was so much as myself came across, which is maybe what you wanted for a professional group. But just there's so much stuff with this that I wanted to share, really.